Hello everyone. So today we'll be looking at class number 8, and we most probably will be covering the last learning outcome here. So as you guys can see my screen, I'm pointing out to the learning outcome 7 here. Um, so if you can see here, we've covered number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So last class we were looking at the risk mitigation techniques, the global risks involved for businesses that deal internationally. And also we looked at the mitigation ways and how the businesses can cope in the markets. So today we will be looking at the strategies, the global strategies. It will be more of a strategic approach. And we will also look at the different ways in which it could be managed. If we will also look at capital budgeting and those techniques related to, because those calculations are quite important when it comes to making strategic decisions. So we will be covering the learning outcome 7 today. So this will be your last learning outcome. So like the last class I mentioned, so once you've covered all the learning outcomes, we will have a look at the assignment questions based on the requirements. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at. Let's move on to the slides. Right. So today it's more about the investment decisions and the evolving strategies, because strategies play a very important role when it comes to businesses. Without suitable strategic application, it would be very difficult for businesses to operate on their daily motives, or which can be short term, and also the long term motives. So strategic application is really important. And with this lesson, we're going to look at the strategies used in the global environment, in a global context, because we've been looking at the concepts of globalization, international trade, international markets from the beginning of the class. So you all would know what the trend is now. So based on the study, it's global finance. So we will be having a much more wider view in when it comes to the global environment. So we're going to look at the strategies based on that. But however, it is not just for the global environment, but you could also apply to any national market of yours. Okay. And then we'll be looking at the capital investments for capital budgeting, because these are important in order to come up with suitable strategies. And then we'll also look at the strategies, the specific strategies that would be developed from an international context. Okay, so these are the main things that we would cover in this recording and the lesson. Okay. Right. So when it comes to understanding the concept strategy, strategy basically refers to the actions that any managers would take in order to attain a firm's goal. A business can have various different kinds of goals. So, but in order to put into a proper action plan, strategies becomes really important. As soon as you start a business, you cannot just work on to achieving your motive, but then you need to break down tasks and make sure that you properly apply strategies in order to achieve specific segments of the business, so that your overall goal is attained. So, for example, but also I have been discussing from the first class that we have a connection with the different functions of a business, because a business is just not about the profit motive. In order to get to that goal of achieving your profits, you need to make sure that every department in your organization need to work um, with the same idea and the same motive. If one department doesn't understand the particular motive, it would be very difficult for them to move forward. So they are, for example, let it be finance, let it be marketing, or let it be your product or service that you offer, let it be research and development. Everyone has to have the common motive, and they need to understand the reason behind what's happening. So that's where the proper strategic application would come into place, right? So that is about the motive achievement through strategic applications. And the next point, firms need to pursue strategies that increase profitability and profit growth. So that's the main motive. So you can't have strategies developed just for the sake of developing strategies. You need to have a motive there. Either if you have a profit achieving organization, or you have a charity, at the end of the day, each organization has a goal. So you need to make sure that you are working towards achieving that particular goal. So only then you will be able to properly come up with suitable strategies. So also you need to pursue those strategies that would meet those goals. So if you're, as an organization, if your goal is to increase profits at a certain period, maybe in 6 months period you want to achieve certain profits, so you need to come up with strategies in order to achieve those strategies. So you cannot just put ABCD strategies, but you need to understand the scenario of the organization. You have to understand the market. You have to understand the internal capabilities and the external factors which affect, and that's how you can come up with strategies. So there are several theories and tools available. For example, you will have SWOT analysis, you will have to deal with value chain analysis, you will have PESTEL. So we've covered certain theories before. So all these have to be made aware, and all the points should be written down and discussed. Only then you can come up with suitable strategies. So when it comes to profitability is the rate of return the firms make on its invested capital. So in order to increase profitability, one of the main elements would be to reduce cost and add value. So when you reduce cost, which means your expenses are less, so in turn that would result in expanding your profits. Another aspect is that adding value. So that would actually increase the price charged for your product. So the more you add value to your product or service, whatever you offer, so in that case, what happens is your profitability would increase because you can charge more price. Okay, so you have a unique selling point there. So in that case, you can achieve more profits. So these are two main ways. Of course, there are other similar ways, or like other more different ways, whatever that's there. But these two play a very important role, because when you are working with different departments, the main motive would be to increase your profits. So the two sub elements that a business would look at is to reduce cost so that they can increase their profits, and then also to add more value so that they have a competitive advantage. Okay. So in order to calculate your profits, profit growth is the percentage increase in net profits over time. So in order to increase your profit growth, firms can sell more in existing markets and expand internationally. So as soon as the business comes up into the market, it's very unlikely for them to move international. So you need to first cater your domestic market. You need to understand what sort of a product is in demand, and how can you sell the product, what sort of unique selling point do you have, and in what ways you could add value. So you gather all these information, and once you've gathered these information, first you cater your domestic market. After that, you move on to your international market, because you know what is in need of the domestic market. Now you focus achieving those profits. You can now expand to international markets by focusing what is in demand there, right? So this is about the profits you can achieve and the way you can expand into global markets and so on and forth, right? Right. So one aspect we saw was adding value. So let's look at that element here. When entering into international markets, when entering internationally to assess potential investment decisions, it is important that you know how firms should create value. Because a firm's value creation is the difference between the price that the firm can charge for a product given competitive pressures and the cost of producing that product. So the profitability is high when the firms create more value for its customers in a low cost. Because at the end of the day, you are your manufacturing cost is less, and also because of the unique points you have, you're going to have more value created. So in that case, your price charged for the product or service that you offer will be high. So your profitability will be high. So this is the basic concept here, right? So let's see how the profits can be increased. So it can be either using a differentiation strategy, which is unique compared to the other organizations. And another point is adding value to your product so that you create or maybe customize products, okay, because that's one of the trends. We also have looked at about customization and standardizations. So customization is also one of the very important elements when it comes to creating value or charging higher prices, and which in turn would result in profits. Also lower cost strategy, and then lowering costs. So either it has to be a differentiation strategy, or you have a unique selling point, you adding more value, or customizing your products and service according to the demands of the consumers, and then using a low cost strategy, and then finally reducing your cost. So through this, your profits could be increased, right? So these are the main points here. So here we look at the value chain, right? So you can see how the combination is made here. So we have the primary activities, and then there are support activities. So within the primary activities, which are the key factors the business needs to consider, would be inbound logistics, the operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and services offered. Then you have the support activities, which would be the infrastructure of the firm, the human resource management, which will be the people resources. You have to be recruiting the right people. Then the use of technology and the procurement. So these joined together will actually decide how a firm should run and how the value could be created depending on the different segments. Okay. Right. So let's look at this. The firm's operations are like a value chain composed of a series of distinct value chain activities, which could be production, marketing, materials management, research and development, human resources, information systems, and the firm's infrastructure. So all of these activities must be managed effectively and be consistent with the firm's strategy. So like I mentioned previously, the research and development team and the human resource management team cannot have different information. If they have different information, that's gonna actually affect the overall motive of the organization. So if it's going to be profit motive, that's, you cannot achieve that if the people's views are different, if the department has different views. So there should be consistency, and then there should be a proper information fed, so that each department would work effectively in achieving the overall goal, so that your firm's strategy is set in concrete. Okay, so value chain activities can be categorized as follows. So like explain it, it can be primary and then support activities. As you can see in the screen here, these elements would fall into primary and then support activities. So here, how can firms increase profits through international expansion? Okay. So here are some of the points how the international firms can expand their market. So that is through selling in international markets. So they can also achieve more profits. And also, like we looked at in the last class, the exchange rate also matters. So, you know, when you are moving into an international market, you need to make sure that the political situation in the country is stable, and then the economic system is good, the government is good to go with. So if it is unstable, it's no use of moving into a country as such, because you cannot have a fixed plan. You need to be changing your plans all the time. And then one of the main reasons why international expansion takes place is to get the benefits out of them. So you cannot go into a country which has issues with terrorism or things like that. And also inflation plays a very important role, because the value of the currency is very less. So you need to make sure that whichever country that you are planning to expand into, that you do the relevant research, understand the benefits, also understand the problems, so that you can come up with strategies accordingly in order to manage whatever the complications that would arise if you enter the market with negative implications. Okay, and also, so realize location economics. Disperse value creation activities to locations where they can be performed more efficiently and effectively. Right, so this is one of the main important reasons why they move, in order to achieve efficiency in operations, because this was something that we discussed on the first class, where the businesses moving to international markets because they are able to be closer to the resources they need, whether it be human resources or either it be the raw materials. So in whatever ways, the reason for the movement would be that, for example, the manufacturing sector plays a very important role, because when you look at all these major brands like Marks and Spencers or Primark, so all these manufacturing section is completely into developing nations, because one thing is that low wages, and then of course they use child labor, which is, with although there are problems that we experience and there are so much of case studies based on that, still they continue to do that. So these these would actually result in lower cost to them, but it is not ethical. However, because of the cost efficiency, they move into such segments. Then right, then you serve and expand global market for a central location. Of course, you earn a greater return because of your international expansion, and skills developed in foreign operations and transfer them elsewhere in the firm. Because when you move into international markets, that expansion would help you to gain more skills. Maybe you can recruit there, or you are taking your organization there. Maybe you can take people from your own country, or you can recruit the people in the international country. In whichever ways, the skills development increases, because there is more new knowledge inputted into the organization. Okay. Okay, so now let's look at what location economies are and why it is important. Location economies are that arise from performing value creation activity in the optimal location for that activity. So wherever in the world that might be, firms can lower the cost of value creation and achieve a low cost position and differentiate their product offering by achieving location economies. Right. So that is, let's look at this. This is the experience curve and it looks at the cost per unit and the cumulative volume. The experience curve refers to the systematic reductions in production costs that occur over the life of a product. Right. So by moving down the experience curve, the firms reduce the cost of creating value. To get down the experience curve quickly, firms can use a single plant to serve global markets, learning effects. So as you can see there, the single plant can serve the global market. So that means like actually the cost is less because when you try to diversify into different products, when it comes to even your international expansion, the cost element would be really high. Let's look at the learning effects. Are cost savings that come from learning by doing. So when the labor productivity increase, individuals learn the most efficient ways to perform particular tasks and managers learn how to manage the new operation more effectively. So I'm going to go back. So as you can see here, this element will be covered in here. Okay. we've already covered about economies of scale when we looked at maybe globalization. It was touched on that point. So economies of scale can be defined as the reductions in unit cost achieved by producing large volume of a product. This happens only for the goods that are manufactured in a standardized manner. This is not possible with customization, because customization is where the product changes, the requirements of the product or service changes depending on the demands of the consumers. But this is possible with a standardized product, right? So the sources of economies of scale we can look at are spreading fixed cost over a large volume so that the cost per unit will be less, and utilizing production facilities more intensively, no idling machineries or anything as such, increasing bargaining power with suppliers. Okay, so these three are the main sources of economies of scale. So now let's look at how can managers leverage subsidiary skills. So they should recognize the valuable skills that could be applied wherever in the firm can rise anywhere within the firm's global network, not just the corporate center. Establish an incentive system that encourages local employees to acquire new skills. Also have a process for identifying when valuable new skills have been created in a subsidiary, and act as facilitators to help transfer skills within the firm. So through these means, the subsidiary skills could be enhanced. Right. So we look at the types of competitive pressures that exist in the global marketplace. So here they say that there are two conflict types of competitive pressures that firms compete in the global marketplace. These pressures limit the ability of firms to realize location economies and experience effects, and transfer skills within the firm. Dealing with both pressure is challenging. Okay, so this is about the pressure of cost reductions and the pressures to be locally responsive. So these are common elements that businesses experience when they move into an international market, right? Because they need to lower the cost. They should not get caught to elements where that would result in increased cost or maybe fraud or anything as such. Also, the pressures to be locally responsive is where you meet the demands of the market. Because one of the main reasons that you expand into an international market is to meet the demands. Just because you analyze the demand only, you are moving into the international market. If you do not, then there is no point in going into an international market. Therefore, it's very important that you need to be careful in understanding the demand. Like I said in the previous classes, one of the factors that affect demand is the likeliness. So it keeps changing. People's wants and needs and preferences keeps changing. So you cannot actually depend on one thing. If someone says that if maybe that you are a chocolate manufacturing company and you manufacture standardized product, and maybe you manufacture only milk chocolates, but and then you see a demand for milk chocolates in an international market for your brand, and then you want to expand. It's okay, it's good for you to expand, but sometimes the taste and preference changes, and then maybe down 6 months time people don't like the milk chocolates, but then they like maybe cashew chocolates. So those chocolates, you should be able to be in a position to meet those demands, is what they're trying to say. Maybe if you don't have the required resources in terms of human resources or in terms of machineries or maybe the infrastructure, but you need to understand the demand and come up with strategies. So this doesn't happen over like in few days. It takes some time. So you need to be able to understand and work on the challenges in order to reduce your pressure. So the pressures to be locally responsive is really high and it needs to be adoptable, and maybe relevant strategies has to be set in place too. This is about future planning. Okay. So here it's about the pressure factors. There are different points here that you could have a look at. It was the same thing that was discussed. Right. So let's look at the strategies to compete in international markets. So we have global strategy, transnational strategies, international strategy, and multi-domestic strategy. So as you can see here, there are two elements which would be the cost reduction and then local responsiveness. So as a business, you need to play around with these strategies, understanding the high and low levels of cost reduction, and then the local responsiveness. Okay. So, excuse me. So let's look at those four basic strategies. The suitability of strategy depends on the pressure of cost reduction and the local responsiveness in the industry. So global standardization, the profitability and profit growth is increased by reaping cost reductions from economies of scale, because it's about standardization. So when the name standardization comes, you need to know that, of course, there are benefits of economies of scale. And then learning effects and local economies. The main objective of this strategy is to pursue the low cost strategy in context of a global market. Okay. This strategy makes sense when there are strong pressures for cost reductions and demands for local responsiveness are minimal. The other one would be localization, increases profitability by customizing goods or services so that they match tastes and preferences in different national markets. This strategy makes sense when there are substantial differences across nations with regards to consumer taste and preferences, and cost pressures are not too intense. Then we have transnational. The firms differentiate their products across geographic markets to account for local differences, and they foster a multinational flow of skill between different subsidiaries in the firm's global network of operations. Okay. This strategy would make sense when both cost pressure and the pressure for local responsiveness are intense. Then international, this strategy considers products first, produce for a domestic market, and then sell them internationally with only minimal local customization. This strategy would make sense when there are low cost pressures and low pressure for local responsiveness. An international strategy may not be viable in the long term, as to survive, firms need to shift to a global standardization strategy or transnational strategy in advance for competitors. So in order to get competitive advantage, that shift has to be made. Localization may give a firm a competitive edge, but if the firm is simultaneously facing aggressive competitors, the company will need to have to reduce its cost structures so that they can charge lower prices and then be on the market. So another element that is very important would be industry analysis, because without industry analysis, like I said previously, it would be unlikely for any organization to devise their strategy suitably. So it is important those such analysis are done very well. So in order to do those analysis, there are certain theories and tools available in order to do them in a clear-cut manner. So one of that would be the SWOT, where you analyze the opportunities, threats, the strengths and weakness of the organization. So in understanding that, you know, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and what the opportunities in the market are, and what would be the threats are, so that you can develop your strategies accordingly. The other thing would be the Porter's five forces, which will look at the bargaining powers. And then we have the industrial attractiveness, the McKinsey matrix. Also, you can also use the perfect competition, really observed those elements where you can address it based on each organization. So these are some of the analysis that you can use. So these would be the sub elements of those. So these are just dropped in point form so that you guys can refer to it. But the majority would be, it's very important for you to understand the tools and theories. Like I said in the previous class, when you are doing your assessments, it's very important that you show theoretical knowledge, because without theoretical knowledge, it would not make sense for you to just jump onto your analysis. So show theoretical knowledge, and then you analyze, showing application skills on the chosen organization of yours. So this is how your assessment should be built. Okay. So these are the elements. They have pointed out the elements here of the five forces. They're looking at the rivalry among competitors. So these are some of the elements that you could look at when you are analyzing rivalry among competitors. And then you have threat of potential entries. So barriers come into play, economies of scale, because when an organization has all these benefits with them, it's unlikely another subsidiary could come into the market, because even if they come, they will not be able to operate, because you as an organization, you have economies of scale, meaning your cost per product is less. You are selling it to a wider market, you are producing massive amounts, so your cost per unit is less, meaning you can sell it at a very lower price. So when you sell at a very low price, new organization or new businesses which comes in, they cannot cope with you. So in that case, that is a that's a threat for potential entries for those organizations. Okay, they can't come into place. Then you have the bargaining power of suppliers. For that, of course, you should be someone who should be ordering in bulk. If in case you are ordering in small quantities, you cannot have the bargaining power of the suppliers, whereas they will have, as the suppliers would have, the bargaining power. And then threat of substitutes. So this will be a problem if you don't have a unique selling point. So make sure that whatever the product you sell or service that you sell in the market, you have a unique selling point there, so that no competitor come into place, no substitute can come in, right? This is also a competitive advantage. It's a benefit in terms of competitive advantage. But in order to be unique, you need to have something that's special about your product or service, so that no one can copy that. Okay. Of course, every tool has a limitation, because when it comes to theory and the tools used, you cannot just have advantages. Each tool that we use, maybe let it maybe SWOT or PESTEL or Porter's five forces, everything has their own pros and cons. So these would be the limitations of those, right? Because when you, one of the main points that they are saying is that not all industries are equal, and then it would differ. So the comparison cannot be 100% accurate, right? Because their approaches will be different and so and forth. So in that case, there are limitations, but of course, these analyses are something that's commonly used and it is very important for your assignments. Right, so let's look at. The next would be the international investment decisions. Right. So we will look at the international investment decisions, the appraisals, the capital budgeting, and the relevant calculations and all by the next class. So hopefully we'll cover that, and then we'll have one more lesson to be done, in which I'll touch base on your assignments. Okay. So for now, this is the end of the class, guys. So have a great day.